Imagine the most dangerous men in the world, the ones even those who kill others fear, are now behind a door just inches away from you. What if you could stare into their eyes for just 10 seconds? But today, I'll do it for you. Journey into the depths of the most isolated cells on Earth and face monsters whose stories are forbidden. This is where humanity ends, and you'll never guess what the next story holds. If you dare, keep going. If you think your mind is ready to witness the most isolated and mysterious prisoners on the planet, stay with me until the end of this video. But beware, you might start seeing them in your dreams.
Imagine in the darkness of night, a sinister laugh echoes from an unseen corner, a laugh that sends ice coursing through your veins. We all know Pennywise, that demonic clown with yellow eyes and razor-sharp teeth who comes alive in children's nightmares. But what if you knew this monster wasn't confined to the pages of a novel or the silver screen? In the 1980s, when fear of it gripped the world, a real-life monster lurked among the masses in the form of a clown, John Wayne Gacy, a man with an ordinary face who hid behind the mask of Pogo the Clown. He was no fictional character but a real predator, one who attended children's parties with a grotesque smile and hollow eyes, delivering not joy but death. His victims would vanish, only for their lifeless bodies to be discovered the next day in dark, terrifying places, damp basements, silent riverbanks. Today, he sits in prison, yet his shadow still creeps along the walls of history. Perhaps even now, in the silence of the night, someone spotting a lone clown might be reminded of that real-life monster, the one who once roamed the streets of his city with a devilish grin. In the dark and twisted annals of freak show history, the legend of the Crab Boy shines like a terrifying and sorrowful specter, Grady Franklin, a man woven from the fabric of pain and hatred. From his first breaths, the world was cruel to him. A rare disease had twisted his hands into the grotesque, gnarled claws of a crab, turning him into a monster in the eyes of his own family. Crab Boy was not a title but fate's cruel joke, a wound that never healed. He had no childhood to speak of. At 7 years old, while other children laughed in the sunlight, he sought refuge in the dim tents of the circus, a world where being strange was valued. Spectators stared at him with wide-eyed horror or open-mouthed scorn, but the circus was the only place where his difference filled his pockets with coins instead of hatred. Years passed, and amid the stale scent of sawdust and the flickering glow of colored lights, he met a woman, another artist from this land of the forgotten. Perhaps he thought her love would save him. They married, had 4 children, and 2 of them inherited the same cursed claws. But instead of tenderness, Grady chose rage. Alcohol gnawed at his soul, and that tormented boy became a man whose family trembled at the sound of his footsteps. His violence was senseless, his screams shook the walls. Then, one of his healthy children grew up, married, and built a life, and for Grady, it was like a knife to their heart. How could one like him, condemned to eternal suffering, bear to see happiness in his child's eyes? Jealousy blinded him, and in a moment of madness, he picked up a gun and aimed it at his daughter's face. The prison years passed, but prison wasn't built for men like him. When he was released, the world was no longer his home. His ex-wife, the woman he once believed could save him, was now in the arms of another man. That was betrayal, and betrayal had only one punishment. They took his threats seriously. So the woman struck first. For $1,500, she hired a carnival worker to end the story. And so, the life of the Crab Boy came to an end, alone, in darkness, with no one to shed a tear over his unmarked grave. On his tombstone, only a name was carved, along with 2 clasped hands, perhaps a symbol of a prayer that was never answered. Jason Barnum, the man who blurred the line between monster and man. Imagine staring into an eye devoid of white in the darkness of night, an eye that seems to be a window into the world of the dead. This is just a part of the living nightmare that has come to be known as the man with the black eye. In 2012, when the sound of gunfire echoed through the restroom of a restaurant, no one knew this was the beginning of unveiling one of the most terrifying criminal figures of the century. His face was a madman's canvas painted with ink of horror. Every black line screamed a story of endless violence. But the more frightening reality was this: those tattoos were not just on his skin, they seemed to have darkened his very soul. His body was a museum of symbols of death, and that giant skull on his head shone like a diabolical crown. On social media, his photos shattered the wall between reality and nightmare, each post a scene from a horror film in which the actor didn't even know he was performing. Psychologists say the eye is the window to the soul, but his black eye was a window to a world that even darkness feared. The Red Ripper, a name that slices through the throat like an icy blade, a legend that overshadows even Jack the Ripper. Here, it wasn't the foggy streets of London but the grey alleys of Rostov that set the stage, with its lead actor, a man whose face seemed ripped straight from nightmares, Andrei Chikatilo, with that hollow stare, that lifeless smile, and hands that caressed death 52 times. He wasn't just a serial killer, he was the architect of hell on earth, a hunter who tore his victims apart like paper, slaughtering for years under the shadow of lawlessness. The police caught him time and again, yet each time he vanished like a specter, no evidence, just a trail of dread clinging to his wake. Until 1990, when the trap finally snapped shut, and the Red Ripper was caught at last. His confessions dripped like blood from an old wound, first 36, then 52, maybe more. The Russian court, ever fond of spectacle, handed him over to the firing squad, not for justice, but for vengeance. And honestly, if they ever needed a portrait of the devil for the history books, Chikatilo's face would be the prime candidate, that empty gaze, that visage even death itself feared. Eileen Wuornos, the monster who escaped from nightmares onto the streets of Florida. They called her the Lady of Death, not for her appearance, but for that hollow, emotionless gaze her victims saw just before the final shot. Between 1989 and 1990, 7 men fell prey to this merciless hunter. But Eileen wasn't just a killer, she was an artist of death, each crime telling a story more horrifying than the last. Charlize Theron in Monster tried to portray these dark dimensions, but even her brilliant performance couldn't fully convey the real terror. Eileen's childhood was steeped in darkness, rape, homelessness, and the cruelty of the streets. Yet, when she was arrested in 1991, no one shed tears for this tragic tale. During interrogations, like a skilled storyteller, she confessed with chilling, graphic detail. For 11 years on death row, instead of remorse, she staged a macabre spectacle. In court, she sometimes acted like a madwoman, other times cracked sick jokes with the judge. But the moment that froze everyone was when she said with eerie calm, "If I were released, I'd kill again." That's when the judge realized he was facing a true monster, not an ordinary criminal, but the embodiment of pure darkness, who saw murder not as a crime, but as inevitable fate. Eileen's story is like your worst nightmare, except you can never wake up and say, "It was just a dream." Imagine sitting in a popular TV dating show from the 1970s, where women choose their future dates by asking men questions. Now, imagine that one of those men is actually one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history. Rodney Alcala, a man who confessed to 34 murders, and whom police suspect may have had over 140 victims, once appeared on the dating game, and, unbelievably, he won. The host introduced him as a charming photographer, the very profession he used to lure his victims. When one of the female contestants, Cheryl, asked him, "What's your best time?" he replied, "Nighttime, because that's the only time there is." His other answers were just as eerie, dripping with a sinister vibe that unsettled the show's cheerful atmosphere. Yet, the audience declared him the winner, though Cheryl, trusting her strong intuition, said he was really weird and turned down the date. And what a wise decision that was. Had she gone, her name might have been added to this real-life monster's list of victims. Rodney Alcala wasn't just a killer, he was a terrifying mix of deadly charm and madness, a man who hunted in the darkness of the streets while winning under the blinding lights of TV studios. The world of crime can sometimes be more surreal than any horror movie. This man is truly strange. His real name was Johan Unkondagen, but he introduced himself as Jack. He was Austrian and had been going in and out of prison since his youth for petty thefts and similar offenses. However, in 1974, he changed and turned to darkness. He strangled a woman with her own bra until she died. He then repeated this same act with around 40 other women before moving to Los Angeles and committing crimes again. He was arrested but strangely released from prison. However, he later committed for more murders. Eventually, the Los Angeles police caught up with him, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. But the terrifying thing about him was that during all this time, he was writing articles for magazines, and nobody knew that the author of those pieces was him. Imagine if your favorite columnist had done such things. I don't know what you would think, but I really find this horrifying. Even after being incarcerated, he continued to write in his cell. He spent about 4 years in prison, but then he decided to commit suicide in a manner similar to his victims. It seems this is what karma is. The Human Plague. This is a title that no one wants to have, unless you are Mary Mallon. This woman holds the record for the most accidental deaths in history. She worked as a cook in New York for wealthy families and in some institutions. However, wherever she went, a horrifying scenario seemed to unfold. Within 2 weeks of starting her job as a cook, all the residents or employees would develop serious conditions. And since healthcare services at that time were not very good, many people ultimately lost their lives. She was investigated by the police multiple times because a very clear pattern of these incidents was observed more than 20 times. But Mary denied any involvement with the food and claimed that it was all one big coincidence. When it became clear that Mary herself was seriously ill, she knew this and caused the food to spoil and make others sick. She claimed she was unaware of this situation. She was treated and then lived freely outside of prison. The police even acted as if she were a victim because she was ill. However, in a diary entry found decades later, she revealed that she had been aware of her condition all along. The real name of this man is Dennis Rader, but authorities and the media called him BTK. I don't want to delve into the meaning of it, but suffice it to say it's not pleasant. Between 1974 and 1991, he killed at least 10 people in Kansas, USA. Like the Zodiac, he also taunted the police by writing letters, mocking them for failing to catch him. However, these letters ultimately led to his arrest in 2005. But the interesting part is how they discovered that BTK was Dennis. He sent a floppy disk to the police along with a message ridiculing them for not being able to catch him, but from that disk, they extracted a deleted file about his church, as he was strangely an active church member. They then used DNA evidence from the disk and the church to finally track him down and arrest him. He was convicted of killing 10 people and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2005. And this criminal is still in prison. But don't worry, the judge has said he will never get out of prison. Next is Untouched. This man earned this nickname because he killed over 5,000 people with just his hands. His real name was Saul Vikla, and he lived during the Ottoman Empire. On average, he killed 4 people a day for 5 years. But how did he do it with his hands? Well, it all came down to strangulation. Unbelievable, but he did this to every person, and it always worked. He was either extremely strong or highly skilled, but undoubtedly, he was a madman. This is a story from history, dating back to the Ottoman Empire, but it seems even back then, there were evil people. He had no motive, or at least his motive remains unknown. Well, now that you've become familiar with these giants of the criminal world, a big question arises: why are we so fascinated by the worst of humanity? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. What do you believe is the root of this fascination? Is it fear? Curiosity? Or something else? Now it's your turn. In your opinion, which of these terrifying prisoners was the most frightening and uncontrollable? Write their number in the comments. For example, write number 5. Let's see what the majority thinks. And if you know someone who loves such scary and shocking content, share this video with them. With your help, we can reach 1 million subscribers. And this is only possible with your support. A very scary ending is on the way. Until the next video, goodbye.